we're going to do some screen share today too, because Lisa Gordon, who's here tuning in, jumping in from Santa Fe, and Evelyn Gottschall Baker, who is living the dream on the western slope of Colorado. She's here. So they have given me some influential artists that they either know or they just have, you know, how just seeing things and being around stuff is really important to artists in this sort of community way. So we're going to do some screen share and we're going to talk about it. And you know what? I think no time like the present. So you know what? I am going to spotlight both of you, ladies, and then we are going to, there you are. Today we really want to talk about the concept of, well, taking a concept or a metaphor or something like that and creating it in 3 dimensions. Like you add that 3rd dimension to any piece of art and, you know, we've got logistical issues, but also your brain has to wrap around stuff in a different way, I think. But I'm hoping you can enlighten us on this. And so why don't let's pop into a screen share and yeah, here we go. So hopefully that's working for everybody. You know what? I'm going to do one thing here. I'm just going to drop out and I'm going to add the chat so I can see it. Kind of hoping I can see the chat when you all ask a question. But if I don't get to you right away, please know that I will. We will ask these questions of our artists here today. So we're going to start out with Lisa, actually, but this is very much, these conversations have been different than the ones that we did at the start of the Coors show, before the Coors show, because these questions are more diving into a topic or a concept. And I want you, Lisa and Evelyn, to really kind of respond to each other as well. So let's hop in, and we're going to talk about Rico Eastman first. And Rico was a wonderful influence on your work, Lisa. And I love that we're starting here because people who know your work, I think they might be scratching their head right now. They're like, I don't see a horse.
I don't see the connection.
Tell us the connection.
Well, you know, so much of developing as an artist happens in, well, your beginning stages, and in my case was graduate school. You know, I started sculpting the horse, and then I was admitted to graduate school, and the horse was kind of, you know, a cliche image, and I was semi-discouraged from doing it. And Rico was a sabbatical replacement for my full-time professor there, and he worked in steel. And so I really became enamored with steel, watching him work and develop these the pieces. This one that's on screen is a puzzle piece that fits together. Only he can put them together. They're just he was a genius, actually. And but more than that, he was a friend, and we hung out, and, you know, a group of students and teachers hanging out, shooting pool, and just kind of doing that, sharing ideas and talking to each other, really had an impact on me. And he actually, at one point, you know, I was down because, I'm doing the horse and nobody gets it. And anytime I talk about something, it's all about the technique of how to do it. Is they're not talking about the concepts behind it. And he's like, well, you know why? You've already developed as an artist. You are an artist. So stop thinking yourself as a student. You are an artist, and you could quit school right now and go on your own, and you don't need anything from us. Okay, but I like being here, so I see. So the steel, and manipulating that steel. We've got some steel pieces here, and then eventually they translated into bronze. So that's where that came from.
You know, and this is okay. So I want to point something out here too that is fascinating to me that, well, and I think is important to talk about. Creating sculpture is physical, hard labor in a lot of respects. Bronze alone, but steel. Like, how did that captivate? Like, neither of these women on this call are big macho, you know? And this is really physical. Like, I know sculptors who in their later years have really just stopped because they cannot physically move the work around anymore. They've got back problems and things like that. So, I mean, tell me about this. Like, what captured you about steel?
You can get scale with it. You can scale it as a student or as a young artist, not having a big pocketbook. You can get that scale and get that representation, for lack of a better word, the pedestals that my pieces are placed on, but they're metaphorical too. So, and that developed early on. And so that was the main thing, scale. Let's get them up in a way that I can afford. And then later on, I was able to just take that aesthetic and make it into bronze, which is, more prestigious. So, but steel, I still love steel. I can do things with steel and combining it with the bronze actually has a kind of a metaphor in the back of my head where steel is industrial and bronze is more organic because you can cast it. So in this, the horses are cast. And I think that might be a lot of Evelyn's work is that, she's pushing and casting this organicness, but it is physical and I'm not sure where I'm going with this.
Yeah, but you know what? How about this? Because I think that's a great segue. And Gemma would like to know, Lisa, what drew you to work in metal, which I think you're kind of getting at here, but also she's asking, do you have a metal you prefer to work in and why?
I think I prefer the bronze just because of the wax part way back in the beginning, the actual manipulation and the hands-on sculpting starts in wax. I like that the most. But then it gets kind of exciting and intuitive, and because most of the time I am putting the horse before the cart, proverbially, because I make the horses before I make the bases. This guy right here is one of the first that's a base before a horse. So now I have to take and put the horses into this. I don't normally do that. It comes after. So it's a process. So any given time, right now I'm working a lot in wax, but in a little while, I'm going to spin my camera real fast. I'll be switching gears and dealing with metal.
Wow.
Yeah. And so to switch gears takes another mindset. And then also to fabricate takes a whole nother mindset, which I'm starting to rely on a fellow artist that he's much better at being picky and making these things more precise. I did not weld this together. I said, make me something. And he did. And so now and I love that this is a new collaboration. I've asked several fabricators that they're just better at it than me. So I've asked them to create things for me, and they're like, but you got to tell me what to do. So that's hard. They won't just, make something like that. Yeah. And he just came over and grabbed all my bronze and came back with this. And I love it.
Okay, that is an aspect of bronze work in particular, that it is a collaboration, because once you send it to the foundry, you've got artisan working on every stage of the way, right down to the finished patina. And I know some artists like to do the patina, other artists like to work with an expert on it. But sculpture, you have to you have to collaborate along the way with it. So that
Yeah,
adds
to
a
some
different
extent.
dimension.
Yeah, I have a foundry up in Colorado, Mad Castings. Thank you guys if you ever see this. They're, they give me back the raw metal, and I still don't like letting go of it. Yeah, I just don't think that I enjoy that process of welding them together and, grinding on them and doing that process. I enjoy that. And I actually, in the pre-work, I'm putting the things where I want them, not where they want them. So I'm tending to start sending a lot of my pieces with the irrigation system that goes in the bronze already connected, so they know where to touch my pieces. I don't want them in that place. I want them in this place because I know the finish of what it's going to be. And so anyways, that's technical.
Yeah, no. So, okay. So Gemma has another question, and I'm going to move over to Evelyn has asked us to take a look at Alicia Lomne. So let me just ask this. Gemma is asking, Lisa, do you prefer working spontaneously with ideas or having a structured design in mind, drafting it prior to creating your pieces? And I want to use this also. Lisa, maybe think about that. And I'm going to actually point this question to Evelyn and have that sort of launch. Evelyn, if you would talk about, you have a kind of a professional friendship with Alicia, and how has she inspired you? And I'm guessing you inspired her, and you are working in glass. So I want to kind of point that out as well to people, that it's a different process, but there's a lot of that very physical aspect to what you're doing as well. So tell us what you're working on there.
Right. The thing that drew me to Alicia's work is the softness of the glass. You don't see a lot of transparency. She's bringing in, if you look at those pieces that sort of look like mushrooms growing out of the side of a vessel, bringing nature into it, but it's her own take on it. And then the technique for this is pot de verre. So she's using a mold process and then making the pieces and combining it. And the final pieces are put together in a kiln. So it's the heat work, the understanding the technical aspects of the glass, all of those things. I really find the challenge of glass, I think, is what spurs me on.
Yeah.
So probably the best thing from there is if you look at this piece that I did with, I call it Shed. Oops, I guess you can't see it.
Yeah, we'll come back to you in a second
Okay.
and take a look at some of those pieces. What I'm wondering, tell me this. Tell me when you, remind me, because you didn't start in glass, right?
No, I started as watercolor and oil traditional painting. Then I moved to stained glass and then to what we call kiln form glass.
Yeah. And what happened there? Like what just jived with you? Like, Lisa's talking about Rico Eastman saying, hey, look, you're already an artist. And I work in steel, give it a shot kind of thing. What happened there with you?
I don't have a lot of formal training. I never went to art school. So more of it is just in the background as I had my professional career, taking classes occasionally. And of course, drawing and painting, things like that were just natural, easy to do, or easier to do. I was drawn to glass simply because of the beauty that comes through glass itself. When I'm drawing and painting, I tend to be very realistic, photorealistic almost.
Yeah.
A lot of nature type of things. And when I discovered fused glass, I started out, as most do, with flat And I discovered, well, okay, I can draw. I took a couple classes from a friend of mine, Kelly, where I can draw with glass powders. So I was translating, instead of using watercolor and oils, I was doing it in glass.
Yeah.
But I kept missing the depth, the structural part of it. I kept trying to put that into my work, even as a watercolor and painter. I wanted that depth, but with sculpture, it is there. The depth is there.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm doing my hand, my arm, it's a three-dimensional object already. So then it's just a matter of taking those components and putting it together as a piece of work.
So I'm gonna re-ask Lisa's question here to both of you, because I want to move into the conceptual side of what you do, of how you are taking an idea or a metaphor or responding to something in nature or something in society or something that's just really nagging at you in your mind. How do you move from the logistics to actually making that statement with your work? And so let me ask Lisa's question one more time, Gemma's question one more time. Do you prefer working spontaneously with ideas or having a structured design in mind and drafting it prior to creating your pieces? So Evelyn, thoughts on that?
I don't draft.
Yeah.
I'm horrible now. I don't draw or sketch very much at all. It's in my mind. And for instance, like the piece with the antler, I knew what I wanted conceptually in my mind. And then I go to, okay, in order to make that, what are those components that I need to make? I need to make the glass out of rock. I need to make the branch out of rock. Out of glass. Everything's out of glass. Make the antler out of glass, and then bring those pieces together. And again, I like the technical challenge of doing it in glass as much as finishing the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both.
Yeah.
But I don't draw or draft out things on paper or sketch them out. They're in my head.
Does the concept lead, or do you just get started with this inkling of an idea and let it go, and then all of a sudden it starts to form into?
Yes, generally that's much more of what it is. I knew I wanted to do something with an antler. I knew that I wanted to make an antler out of glass. So then how do I present that, and what does it mean in the final piece? And to me, what it means is antlers, the deer shed their antlers every late winter, early spring.
Yeah.
And then they grow new ones, and they go through this every year. So it's a rebirth and a renewal. And it's the same thing that we can do ourselves every year. Take a time in your year, whether it's your birthday, whether it's New Year's, and bring that renewal, shed the old, and start new. But at the same time, if you're out walking in the woods, hiking, and you come across an antler and it's partially covered with the debris, it's a treasure.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So just trying to bring all of that into a single piece.
Lisa, how about you? Is it spontaneity or?
It's a lot of spontaneity, but it also becomes more, and I think the same with Evelyn, is that it's, in the end, it becomes problem solving. You've got the organic elements, the sculpture per se, and then it's problem solving. How do I represent this? I've got these ideas that rebirth and the shed, that is a wonderful starting point right there. And you go and make objects, which, that's essentially what most of us sculptors are, just object makers. And then the art comes in how we're assembling them, in what context we're putting them in. So I tend to work more spontaneous. Something in my mind, like right here, these two are pit ponies. Playing with the horses, that's the easy part. Coming up with some kind of base that conveys that idea of pit ponies. And that's the challenge. And that's where the experiments and, the problem solving come in.
So let's talk about conceptual work, because I think for sculptors, doing installations is really kind of one of those, it's probably terrifying, but such a joy to take an idea and see it come to life in 3 dimensions. And this is an artist, Alison Lowry, that Evelyn wanted to talk about here a little bit today. And I'm just in love with these. So the only thing I want to let you all know about, this is all glass. So Evelyn, go.
When I first saw Alison's work, and I don't know her personally, but it's the whole thought-provoking aspect of what made her do this, what is the story behind this, and then once you know that it has to do with young unwed mothers in Ireland, that a lot of them have just disappeared. They were unwed mothers. They had their babies, but these orphanages, what happened to these people? And I think when you look at the dresses or the shoes, things like that, and they're hanging there in an empty room, that whole emotion comes with it. So you might not know the story behind walking into an installation like this, but I don't see how you can help but feel that emotion that comes with it. Right. And I think that sculpture really lends itself to bringing a lot of that emotion and bringing some of these dark aspects of human life to the forefront and bringing a voice to these forgotten people, for these forgotten young children and young mothers.
Well, and in essence, the layers of meaning too, because there's this installation and you walk in and then you can be surrounded and consumed by it if you allow yourself. But in the case of this particular installation, there's what she was attempting to represent and talk about, and then the extra layer of this is glass, and glass is so strong, and yet you drop it and it's shattered, right? So there's that incredible metaphor that comes with presenting this concept and this idea and having this conversation in glass too.
Right. And also with her work, you don't see that beauty of the light shining through like a cathedral window, or, the piece balance that I did with the hand when the light shines through it. You don't see that. So glass, in a lot of ways, how you use which technique you can use, you can bring that into it. There's so many possibilities.
So I'm gonna click over to our next one, and this is Deborah Butterfield, the incomparable Deborah Butterfield, and Lisa really wanted to talk about Deborah, and it was funny because before we were talking, and I clicked open this website, and she's like, "Well, Deborah doesn't have her own website," and I'm like, "Well, of course, because she's Deborah Butterfield." She's Deborah Butterfield. So, and she is amazing. And there are so many artists out there who have tried to copy what she's done. But basically, and the Denver Art Museum has several of her large installation sculptures, but she's taken just discarded materials and put them into the form of horses. All her work is horses. Tell me the inspiration with Deborah and how it translates into your work, because it's very different.
Yeah, oh yeah, well, people are, well, you're like Deborah Butterfield, isn't it? Not even. Um, the one thing that I do really respond to Deborah Butterfield's work is the quietness of her horses. They're not heroic. They're there. They're just standing, being horses, maybe laying down. And a lot of my horses are not. They're not running through open fields, and most of the time they're just they have that presence, and that's from her work. So it's and again, she can command a space. It wasn't, I don't know that her early work was, she was trompe l'oeil in the California School of Arts up in San Francisco, where a lot of her fellow compadres at that time were working, and but it went big really fast, and with the pieces just blowing me away when I saw them for the first time.
In a way, Deborah Butterfield gives other artists permission.
Yeah. And that was one of the first that I ever knew of doing horses contemporary. Of course, in painting, you had Susan Rothenberg, all coming from the same era of being able to take the imagery that was, kind of almost cliche, and doing it in a new way. And that was inspiring to kind of catch the tail end of that, and be able to keep that in my work, so.
And is it just something in the back of your head that, like I was saying, it's permission, or like, does it just say, hey, Lisa, go further? You can go further.
Her work versus mine?
No, just like, yeah, I mean, I guess when we're talking inspiration, because obviously you're not looking at her work and saying, oh, I could do that in my style. Like, it's not that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
What is the inspiration? How does that figure into your practice?
Well, for Deborah Butterfield, it was the permission to do the horse in a fine art way. And so that in and of itself is all I needed, and then after that, it was just finding artists that made me think, and were doing things that I liked, like animals, and that they don't have to be common or overdone. Even Gwyn Mural, who's artist, you're going to look at her work, it's just how it commanded the space is what impressed me. It wasn't that, oh, look at, she made a beautiful animal, because they're simplified, but they're not stylized. So that was inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. Same question to you, Evelyn. Is this idea of, as an artist, being able to expand what you do in a way, or being pushed by just, you don't even have to know the artist to be pushed to try different things.
And when you look at this piece, this is Sylvia Levinson. Mm-hmm. She lives in Italy now. She was born in Argentina, I believe, and moved over to Italy. When I first saw her work, number one, it's glass. So that's how I get exposed to a lot of these contemporary glass artists, is simply because of the glass world that I live in. Mm-hmm. But then she takes something like a hand grenade.
Yeah.
And, serves it up. So it's always, what is she, not so much what she's doing it for herself, is what does it stop and make the viewer feel, think about, just, are they turned off? Because, it's just hand grenades made out of glass, big deal. Or does it make the viewer really stop and think, Is it something about what she's gone through in her life?
Yeah.
You know, who hasn't had explosive relationships, at least to some extent in their life, especially as women? Is that what she's trying to say? You know, so we get to bring forth a piece and then let the viewer take it from there.
Yeah.
See beauty or just dismiss it. You know, a lot of the pieces that I do with bones, I've had people say, well, why replicate bones in glass? Why take all of the hours and do that in glass when you could just use a skull? There's plenty of them around. You can buy them off the internet. And so it's a combination of the challenge of creating it, and then what thought am I trying to get the viewer to think, to nudge them in a certain direction, not necessarily lead them to a conclusion, but to at least nudge them in a certain direction and maybe put a thought into their head that they haven't thought about before. And so when I see Sylvia's work or Alison's work, it's about the permission. For me, it's the permission to take it. What is it out there that we're dealing with right now? I live in the West, so when I stop and think about things, about, you know, the Pronghorn piece in the back that I have with the little houses around it, how has human development impacted the pronghorn?
Yeah.
When I first moved to Colorado, I only saw them out there in the South Park and in the prairies. Now you can see them in people's backyards on the edge of town. And so that's the lesson that I'm trying to do for myself is, and it's not that it's a negative, they've learned to adapt and they're surviving just fine. So it's not that I'm saying that humans only have a negative impact on it, but what is that balance with the coyote skull? You know, coyotes have learned to live in every single state, in cities and out in the country. So it just is sort of a process, and then I try to bring it into my pieces.
So several things that have questions that have come into my mind as you both are talking. And one is the market selling work versus damn the market, I'm just going to bring these ideas forward. And I think as much as we'd like to say we're purists, and this is purely art, but you know, when you create, each of you create a challenging work, you're challenging people. And you know, in the context of certain venues, people don't always like to be pushed like that. So do you have to kind of take these into account as you're working, or do you just say, you know, I'm doing this purely for me and I just need one person to get it and buy it? That's all that matters.
I could add to that. I think it's a little bit of both. If I wanted to put something in Coors, I'm going to choose pieces that are going to be part of what the audience wants and expects. I'm not going to make them too uncomfortable because there is a purpose to it. If I have a show at a gallery, where I'm having many more pieces, I'm going to probably put in a couple that are going to make them a little uncomfortable, or, you know, they're not as sellable. This is a very quiet piece, not finished yet by any means, but, and kind of almost sad, and no, don't put that in, it's sad. And it's like, no, it's going in. And some of those pieces are the more popular. They're the ones that make people think and go in, and I've had people with tears in their eyes when they're looking at my work. And yeah, I'm such a goofy person that I get uncomfortable with that. But I guess it's there. and emotions can run high, and pushing my work to, it's not intentional, but what I'm thinking about sometimes can be uncomfortable. So, you know, when you take something like this and put it up, sorry about that, underground, it becomes, you know, oh, that's sad. I don't want to look at that as much. It's not a pretty horse. So,
Yeah.
so it depends on the venue, and ideally I'd love to be able to make absolutely anything that comes into my mind in the way that I want to. But yeah, there's a commerciality that kind of has to be there.
Yeah.
You know, unless I'm filthy rich that can do anything I want. I'm not. So.
Evelyn, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that, but I've got another.
Yeah, let me just jump in real quickly. So I am in a really wonderful place in my life. I don't have to sell my work, which had I been younger, I would have, you know, and done this as a living. I'm supposed to be retired now, although I think I'm working as much, if not more than ever. So it's different. And when I started doing the pieces like the Pronghorn, the Coyote Skull, a wolf piece that I'm working on, I don't care if it sells, fine, but I want to get the piece out there because I need to make this piece. Yeah. There are other pieces like the shed where it's a little bit more of a, you know, I guess a little bit more of a compromise. I made the piece that I want, but it's also a very more nature appealing piece. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, I'm not sure that it gets as much interest, but it's, yeah. So it's, yeah. And then, so it's kind of a combination. Now, moving forward with being, and I'm a really new artist, so having single person shows, being a part of galleries is new for me. Mm-hmm. I haven't had many opportunities there. So I've also just, it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, I've got 50 something nieces and nephews, and someday they'll get a piece of my work. But moving forward and looking at Coors for next year, I'm finding that, okay, I have this idea in mind, I have this idea in mind, and am I compromising my inner self? And so it's a little bit like what Lisa says, I don't think you can forget who the target audience is. Yeah. But I'm still going to make the pieces that I want to make out of glass. And I'm still going to ask to put in at least one really controversial piece. Yeah. And, you know, we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, and I think it's probably this thing that, you know, you can't psych out the audience anywhere you are, right? You just can't. And sometimes, often it's the painting or the sculpture or the photograph that like the artist will just say, I just really think this is too conceptual. I don't think people are going to get it. And I'm like, let's just put it in because it means a lot to you. And I'm feeling this piece, and it goes first, you know? And so you can't do that and I think you have to give the audience credit for bringing questions, intelligence, curiosity, and the desire to be there, you know, in the first place. So, so Gemma is wondering, both of you, when creating your pieces, do you try to intentionally invoke a specific reaction for the audience, or do you just create and let the audience think and feel how they like? Yeah. Lisa, you're shaking your head.
I don't know that... I'm not trying to intentionally pull any heartstrings or make people uncomfortable or exhibit some kind of emotion. You can't control that. So, and I've had, fellow artists, fellow sculptors or painters, I don't like this piece, why would I need to change it. I need to fix it. And I was like, stop it. You made it. It's painting a little bit different, but a sculpture, it's done. It's done. Let the audience decide. It's, once it's done, it's, I wouldn't say it's out of your control, but don't think so hard.
Yeah. Right. Well, and if a big part of this is to be having a conversation with other people, even when you're not there. Like, I know in my art collection, I have certain pieces in different places in the house because they either inspire me when I need it, or they're there to calm me, or there's just something that is happening. And I think if I were to sit down and tell each artist what I felt about the work, they'd probably be kind of shocked and maybe have to button their lip instead of saying, that is not at all what I had in mind, right? But
you get practiced at that. You just kind of,
yeah,
you feel that way. That's the teacher voice coming out. So, and as sculptors, I don't know, Evelyn, if you feel this way, but I get intrigued by people that say, I have a space for this, that I want to put a piece in. I'm thinking of this, and I said, well, maybe I can make something for that space, because space and objects they go together. Open space, fill it. And so why not fill it with something that is intentionally thought to go there? Now, I'm not going to go outside of what I do, but I think in a way that 2D artists, not so much, because, there's the old, let's buy a painting to fit above the couch, and it's got to be the same color as the couch. Sculpture's not necessarily like that. So I find that intriguing. I'm, just kind of, I don't know if that's part of the conversation that's interesting.
Yeah, Evelyn, what do you think about that?
Well, I shy away from commissions, mostly because, the ones that I've done before, mostly stained glass windows, or even a fused glass window for a front door, that type of thing. I've had to take the idea, of course, of the person who's got the commission, and then my mind sees one thing, their mind sees another thing. And if they're thinking stained glass and I'm thinking fused glass, I have to work through all of that. Mm-hmm. Now that I've gotten more into sculpture, I've not been approached for a commission yet, and I'm not sure. I think it would just have to depend on the person and what is it that they're asking. Mm-hmm. Again, I have a little bit of a luxury in that I don't have to rely on commissions to, put food on the table. So I thank Keith every day for allowing me to have this life. He knows how hard I work. It's not, I just come out and inspire. I get a little annoyed with people who just say, oh, well, you just threw that together. No, there's a lot of work, months worth of work on getting a piece to come together. Yeah. But I do have some of that luxury, and I think when I'm making a piece like shed or balance, those types of things, I know what it means to me, but I don't want to try to steer the viewer in any way. Yeah. I want them to have their own conclusions. And if they decide to take it home, then they have their reasons for bringing it home. And it may not be for the same reasons that I made it.
I have a kind of a question, and I'm gonna direct this a little more to Lisa. But as you're talking about, and and also if, as you're talking about, if somebody says, I have this space, and I'm assuming that you would say, I will do something for you. But you can't tell, like, I'm just going to do it. And, they're not going to say, can I have a horse with this and that? And I need it to be this kind of, like, I'm assuming you would just say no, but that's like them art directing you is
If they're going to micromanage me, no,
Yes.
I'm not very good at being micromanaged, but
Yeah.
I don't mind the collaboration of what do you like in this piece? They'll most of the time for commissions, they just want something a little more like their own horse. That's okay. But as far as if it's for a specific space, yeah, I want to work with it, but you're not gonna be dealing with a herd of horses with running, flowing mane, or glorified. You're gonna get my work fit to that space because that's how it's gonna show off my work best.
Yeah. So in yesterday's conversation, we were talking about the intention behind the work, and Sophie Brown was on that call with Ron Hicks, and Sophie and I had been talking about, kind of this thing is that, yes, people love horses grazing in a meadow with beautiful flowers, but that's not what she does. That's not something that she feels is contributing to. Like, it's lovely and it makes you happy in your home. Wonderful.
And they don't want that in a sculpture.
Right. That would be, well, some people probably do, but I mean, but when the work, it becomes to this level of having this personal intention behind it. And, I was thinking two things when it's with the horse, because the horse, and even Evelyn, what you're doing in this stumbling upon a shed antler is like, whoa, wow, this is my lucky day kind of thing,
Right. Yes.
So these objects in your sculptures draw people in a way that's very comfortable. And it's an easy way to bring people in and start a conversation. And so I'm wondering, when you are working and starting these conversations, you're able to do so many things with your subject matter, with your hands, in a way. You can play God in a way and create these situations, right? And I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about that process and how these things kind of flow from this outward idea into something that becomes a more internal conversation.
Lisa, I got to think about it.
Well, for me, the internal conversation takes place with the wax, because you're sitting there intimately sculpting and playing God. You're creating this life that's going to last long before or long after you're gone, hopefully. And so I'm starting to think about that more and more as I make lots of things this last year. I mean, I've just been making, like I mentioned in my last one, lots of little animals that are, fun and really fulfill that kind of God complex. Maybe I'm just making these little objects, and I'm lost. I'm lost again.
Well, you know what? I want to do something here. I want to do one more screen share, because you tossed out a name of an artist, Gwyn, Mural, and I want to screen share that. And I also want to, my wonderful Michael Smith is on this call with us, and he has said, I have talked to a number of my artist friends about the fact that when buying a piece, I often feel like I'm also buying a piece of the artist's soul. I always say that I feel very much like I'm taking a friend home. with me and living with this work. And I see the work, but I see the artist there as well. I hear the voice, metaphorically, of the artist in all the work that I've collected. And so Lisa, I want to drop this, and Evelyn, I want you to respond to that as well. But I wanted to pull up the sculpture of Gwyn mural and have you talk about this, because this is another installation, but there's a lot of conceptual work here as well, and again, sort of the artists making commentary and statements about life and, in my opinion, man's footprint on this planet and how things have had to evolve around us. And Lisa, talk to us about Gwyn's work here.
Well, again, she's another artist that deals with that kind of quiet presence of an animal, and filling the spaces. Every time I've seen her work in exhibitions, she fills a space with negative space. So placing, this is four objects, but they're placed in a way that does create a sense of emotion, and they're not necessarily standalone pieces, although they could be. Yeah. But they're much stronger with their compadres. They're much stronger with the pieces that are meant to be around them. Mm-hmm. And I feel that with my work when I have the opportunity to do an actual show, that you can place many more pieces next to each other, and so that's what she's always inspired me to just look at that space. Yeah. And in a gallery situation, it can be quite challenging, because you do have other artists that you don't want to take away from, and a gallery is needing to stay in business by keeping it profitable.
But it's nice to be given the freedom, right? Yes. And in a way, Evelyn, you have that wonderful luxury, to really explore and go down that path. And maybe talk a little bit about that. And I'm curious about some of the new work that each of you is going into, and we're getting up to our 1 o'clock hour, believe it or not. These always fly by so quickly for me. But I'm wondering if you could each talk briefly about something that you are working on now or next. And I know, Evelyn, there's a piece coming up that I'm hoping we're going to get next year.
I'm hoping, and it's going to be the controversial piece. I had hoped to get it done for this year, but it didn't make it. So it's a wolf skull, much like the coyote skull. Mm-hmm. And I have it started in the background there, that white skull.
Yeah.
And then let me just grab this.
Sure.
So we in Colorado had to vote this year on whether or not to introduce the wolf.
That's right.
And I believe it passed by a narrow margin. I won't say how I voted for it. So I have a cast hand that's not quite finished. I have to finish cold working it and cleaning it up. And then I have some glass bullets that are also unfinished. And so these are going to be a part of the piece, because it's one of those thought-provoking with the wolf skull. Are they a menace because your family is a rancher?
Yep.
You're concerned about your livestock.
That's right.
You're concerned about, your animals on your farm. Are you a romantic because you love the vision of a wolf howling at the moon? And so you want to think about them out there living in nature and everything. And so we as humans, again, have this balance with the bullet. And what would you do with it? Would you use it or not? And
Well, and you know what? I would even say, Evelyn, that, in the West, and I love that we're getting this sculpture next year, because in the West, we have very unique issues that we deal with that go back hundreds of years. And
Right.
the reality is that we fenced in this land. We made nature bend to us. And in so doing, did such wonderful things like create the Dust Bowl, and wipe out or nearly wipe out species. So it's almost even beyond, is it a romantic way to look at this? Is it that we are maybe realizing that we've done some damage, and is there a way that we can kind of repair some of that damage? But it is, but it is livelihoods too.
Right. And is it, wolves used to be here, and now we're having to reintroduce them.
Right.
And oh, by the way, we're really not reintroducing the wolves that were here. We're reintroducing a slightly different species.
Right.
So here we are, humans, again, interfering. And at what level, our hand, the things that we do impacting. So this is the piece, that will be in there, more from my heart.
Right.
Than some of the other pieces that I'm also working on that have more to do with the Western culture, ranching and things like that.
This is the amazing thing in my mind as a curator that I love that artists do, is that you can, without hitting anyone over the head with an idea or a thought or whatever it is, you can also introduce a concept and start a conversation, right? And help people think about the other side of it, So I truly appreciate that. And both of you, I think, bring so much to that conversation. I want to read, Michael Smith has added a comment there. He has an artist friend who's a good friend. And he says, twice now in the course of our friendship, I felt I had to confront him to make sure that he was okay because his work had become dark and troubling. Have you ever had that instance, Lisa? Have people ever read a lot into, or does that come out in the work? Emotional?
No, because I'm such a,
You are.
And moreover is that my personality doesn't necessarily fit this, but no, I've never had that happen. What did happen is when the emotional aspect of being really down, I won't make work. So there was a 2-year period I mentioned in the last video or taping that I had to sell my horse. Things were going wrong. That wasn't even the darkest time in my life, but because my muse was gone, I just couldn't make art. And then, and then once I found it again, you haven't been able to stop me. I mean, I've gone through my father passing away, which was a very hard thing, years ago. But during that time is when I started getting back. He was just so mad at me because I kind of given up, and then I started making art again, and it just started being really silly little things because I'd be in the hospital and I'd be working on. You can't bring wax into hospitals; they really don't like that. I worked on 2D drawing and watercolors, and a lot of times just leaving them for people. Here, take them. So weren't that good. So, but it was the therapy, and that got me back into it. So,
and probably brought joy to your father at the end of his life.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting thing that Michael brings up, because like I will say for sure in the artists that I talked to yesterday, and Ron Hicks and Sophie Brown, there was a major shift for both of them that happened. And it was really around PTSD. And for Ron, it was the PTSD finally coming to the surface and him not being able to shove it down anymore.
Mhm.
And for Sophia, it was some devastating losses of family in her life. And the work did shift dramatically. And it's interesting because I think even if it's not an impetus like something that profound, I think when you're creating something that is part of you and your soul, and the viewers who are in tune with it, they do have a reaction to it.
Mhm.
Have you found that?
Yeah. You just, it's so intrinsic that whatever you're putting in will seep out. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Evelyn, has that been?
Well, I think maybe some people, because I do so much with bones and skulls,
Mhm.
but at the other hand, take for instance, just the bowl and the branch. When I first moved to Colorado, this is what I saw when I went into the woods in an aspen grove in the early fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Colorado blue sky, it's the golden aspen leaves, and this is glass. So I could have used a wood branch, but I decided to make it out of glass.
And I
So
appreciate that.
I have those pieces to juxtapose some of the darker.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't see myself going there. And there's a piece that it's working in my head where I have the pelvis and part of a backbone of an animal. But if I do that, I probably want the piece that I've been thinking about is maybe I have a flowering cactus come out of that so that I juxtapose
Yeah.
the death with the life. It is what the West is about. There's so much of the starkness, but yet everywhere you look, there's beauty.
Oh, I like
But you
that.
just have to look for it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting the yin and the yang in the work,
Right.
right? Well, guess what, ladies?
It's time.
Right.
It's been an honor again. Thank you.
Thank
It's truly
you.
an honor.
Thank
These have been so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for opening up your studios and thank you for opening up your hearts to this too, because I get so many emails. It's really been amazing emails and notes, and people really love being able to get inside the studio, but then also to hear really what's behind the work. And so I'm going to kind of try and keep these going. I'm thinking Thursday at noon, and we'll just kind of bring in different topics. And so I'm
Great.
sure we'll be having you two back at some point. So
I just want to say one thing real quick.
yeah.
When you were talking, and I'm sorry, I forgot his name, that when you were talking about your personal collections the other day.
Yeah.
We've been to that. Yes,
Yeah.
we've been to that museum. It's a wonderful museum. My husband grew up there, not far from. We haven't been for a few years, so
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So
Oh my
next time we're back in Georgia, we're going to go again.
Go see the Booth Museum and
Yes.
stop in and see Seth, because he is just a joy. He's wonderful. All right. Hey, tomorrow is the screening of In the Yards. So that is a film that was made by an artist in Denver. Eileen, shoot, it's on our website. Darn it, it just flew out of my brain. So hopefully you guys will find that and tune in. And Krista is going to try her interviewing chops with Eileen tomorrow. So anyway, and then just check out the website, everybody who's listening, and we'll put stuff out there that we'll just kind of keep some talks going throughout the year and keep
Wonderful.
people engaged. Yeah.
And let's hope we'll be able to be in person next year.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Let's hope. Ladies, Lisa, Evelyn, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Thank you for coming.